we're hopping into the Pork Chop Express, turning up the 80s synth and heading straight into the neon-lit chaos of Chinatown to revisit a cult classic, Big Trouble in Little China. Released in 1986 and directed by the great John Carpenter, this genre-blending action fantasy comedy is part martial arts epic, part supernatural adventure, and part parody of the all-American action hero. On the surface, it's about truck driver Jack Burton, who gets pulled into a mystical gang war in San Francisco's Chinatown while helping his friend rescue a kidnapped woman from a 2,000-year-old sorcerer. But in reality, it's a wild mashup of ancient Chinese mythology, 80s bravado, lightning-shooting villains, underground neon lairs, and one of the most gloriously clueless heroes ever put on screen. At the center of the chaos is Jack Burton, played by Kurt Russell. Now, by 1986, Russell was already a familiar face thanks to his earlier collaborations with Carpenter, like Escape from New York and later The Thing. He'd go on to appear in everything from Tombstone to Guardians of the Galaxy, proving he could handle westerns, horror, sci-fi, and evil Marvel cosmic dad energy. In Big Trouble in Little China, though, he plays against type. Jack thinks he's the hero. Loud, confident, constantly monologuing into his CB radio, but he's often confused, outmatched, and frequently unconscious. The real hero, that would be Wang Chi, played by Dennis Dun. Dun had previously worked with Carpenter in Prince of Darkness, but here he's the emotional core, an actual martial arts powerhouse of the story. Wang is trying to rescue his fiancée, Miao Yin, from the clutches of an ancient sorcerer named Lo Pan. And Lo Pan, he's played with delicious theatrical menace by James Hong, one of the most prolific character actors in Hollywood history. You've heard his voice in Mulan, seen him in Blade Runner, and probably spotted him in dozens of TV shows across decades. As Lo Pan, he's campy, sinister, ancient, cursed, and somehow still hilarious. Helping guide our heroes through the mystical mayhem is Egg Shen, played by Victor Wong. Wong brought a grounded warmth to the role. Many fans also recognize him from The Last Emperor, and later from Tremors. His Egg Shen is equal parts wizard, tour guide, and grandfatherly mystic, with a flair for dramatic entrances. And rounding out the main cast is journalist Gracie Law, played by Kim Cattrall. Before she became globally famous as Samantha in Sex and the City, Cattrall brought sharp wit and independence to Gracie, a character who refuses to be the typical 80s damsel. So here's the setup. Jack Burton arrives in San Francisco's Chinatown to pick up a friend and collect a gambling debt. Simple enough, but when Wang's fiancée is kidnapped at the airport by a street gang, Jack follows him into a shadow world hidden beneath the city, a realm where ancient Chinese sorcerers wage war, 3 elemental storm warriors descend from the sky, and Lo Pan seeks to marry a green-eyed woman to break a centuries-old curse. Yes, it escalates quickly. We get martial arts duels, magic potions, elevator fights, underground sewer monsters, and one of the greatest lines in 80s cinema.
It's all in the reflexes.
But the real genius of the movie is this. Jack Burton isn't the traditional hero. He's the sidekick who thinks he's the hero. While Wang does the acrobatics and emotional heavy lifting, Jack mostly fires wildly into ceilings, knocks himself out before big fights, and drives the getaway truck. And that subversion, that's part of why the movie endures. When Big Trouble in Little China hit theaters in 1986, it didn't exactly light up the box office. It was competing with heavy hitters like Aliens and struggled to find an audience. Some viewers didn't know what to make of it. Was it an action movie, a comedy, a kung fu fantasy, a parody? The answer is, yeah. It was ahead of its time, blending Eastern mythology with Western genre tropes in a way mainstream audiences weren't fully ready for. But on VHS and cable TV, it thrived. Sleepovers, late night reruns, quote-along rewatches, that's where it became a cult classic. This is peak 80s practical effects. Neon lighting, fog machines, matte paintings, rubber monsters, lightning hands, and Carpenter's synth-heavy score driving everything forward like a supernatural pulse. Unlike many films of its era that leaned into macho seriousness, Big Trouble in Little China is in on the joke. It plays everything straight, but winks at you the whole time. And on to the big question. Why are we still talking about this movie 40 years later? First, the genre blending feels modern. Today we're used to cinematic universes, fantasy mashups, and tonal shifts between comedy and action. But in 1986, this kind of cross-genre chaos was risky. Now it feels prophetic. Second, the subversion of the white savior trope. Jack thinks he's the center of the story, but he isn't. Wang is the true hero. The emotional stakes belong to him. The cultural mythology belongs to him. In 2026, audiences appreciate that inversion far more clearly than they did in the 80s. The film's decision to make the loud American trucker the comic relief rather than the savior feels surprisingly progressive. Third, practical effects have aged with charm rather than embarrassment. In an era where CGI can sometimes feel weightless, the tangible sets and creature effects of Big Trouble in Little China feel handcrafted, physical, real. And finally, nostalgia. But not just for nostalgia's sake. The movie represents a time when studios occasionally greenlit weird mid-budget risks. It wasn't a sequel, it wasn't based on a comic book, it was just bonkers creativity backed by a studio willing to roll the dice. That kind of filmmaking feels rare now. Kurt Russell's performance has only gotten better with time. His commitment to playing Jack as a blowhard with absolute sincerity is comedic gold. He never plays it like he's in on the joke, and that's what makes it work. James Hong's Lopan remains iconic, equal parts theatrical villain and ancient bureaucrat annoyed at immortality paperwork. Kim Cattrall gives Gracie Law intelligence that keeps her from being a one-note character. And Dennis Dunn's grounded performance anchors the whole thing emotionally. It's a perfect ensemble for a perfectly chaotic story. You see its fingerprints everywhere. Action comedies that undercut their own heroes, fantasy films mixing Eastern and Western mythologies, self-aware genre mashups, even modern superhero movies owe a little something to that big action, bigger absurdity balance that this film helped refine. And let's not forget, it gave us one of the coolest villain entrances ever, descending in a beam of light with thunder crackling behind him. Still awesome. Big Trouble in Little China isn't just an 80s curiosity. It's a reminder that movies can be weird, loud, mythic, funny, slightly ridiculous. And sometimes the best hero in the room is the guy who thinks he's the hero, but really just drove the truck. In 2026, with audiences craving originality and personality, this film feels less like a relic and more like a blueprint for bold storytelling. As Jack Burton would say, when some wild-eyed 8-foot-tall maniac grabs your neck, taps the back of your favorite head up against the barroom wall, and asks if you've paid your dues, you just stare that big sucker right back in the eye and say, well, you know the rest. Thanks for watching. And remember,
It's all in the reflexes.